to get my students practicing understanding the essential knowledge statements from the College Board for AP Biology, I make a Google form for each unit, and several times during the unit, during class, I'll ask my students to go into this Google form, choose an essential knowledge statement, and give some reflections on what does it mean or what we've done in class that helps them to understand this essential knowledge statement. So by the end of the unit, I have a lot of responses, and I want to be able to take all the responses of my students and separate them by student. Then I want to give each student a document that has all of their collected answers in there so they can look over them, and maybe even have an idea of maybe what they need to study for, for the upcoming test. So I want to show you the process that I go through to actually do this. One of the important things that I do in this Google form is that I actually have each essential knowledge statement typed out, and I have the students check the checkbox. And I do this on purpose so that it will actually show up in the Google form or the Google sheet that is made from all the responses. This way they can see their response, and they can also see what essential knowledge statement they were actually talking about. So now if we go to the sheet that's made, I have all these responses, and I use an add-on called Autocrat that takes all of these responses and it can put it into a Google document that I've made a template for. But at this point, it would make 20 different documents, but I don't need to make that many documents. I want all of each individual student's answers to go together. So what I need to do is combine rows that have the same name. And what I use is actually an add-on called Power Tools. So I'm going to go ahead and start it, and that will give me a menu to choose from. And I go to Data, and then I want to combine rows. And I let it choose my data. It chooses everything that I have, and that works. I let it the first time at least create a backup copy of my sheet, and so I'm ready to go to the next step. And then I have to choose the key columns with duplicate records. And the key one that I want to use is my students' last names. I want to combine the rows by their last name. So I choose that one, and then I need to choose the values to merge. Well, that's pretty much all the rest of them I want to merge together. And then I choose my action, and what I want to do is merge the values. Okay, and then I need to know, how do I want to separate similar entries or entries that are coming together into one row? So I'm going to just use a space. Okay, and I'm ready to finish. So now Power Tools is working to merge all of my rows. So it says it's looked at my 21 rows. They found 15 duplicates combined into 6 rows, and then they found 6 rows that didn't have anything to combine. So usually I find at this point a couple of my students have maybe added an extra space after their name, and so Power Tools doesn't recognize that it's still the same name. So I take a look and see if I have any that show up more than once. And in this case, I do have one student whose name shows up twice. So I'm going to just click on their last name and then go up here. And she didn't add an extra space there with her last name. But if I look up here, yep, she had an extra space in her second one. So I'm just going to delete that extra space. And now I'm ready to quickly go through this process again. So I combine rows. This time I don't create a backup copy. I already have one. And then I go to next. And the important one for me to look at is last name. And I go to next. I choose all the columns. Again, my action is to merge values. My delimiter is a space. And I can finish. And now the 2 duplicate rows have been combined into one, and now I have 10 unique rows, which is perfect because I have 10 students. So now I'm ready to move on to actually making these into a document. The add-on that I use to make these into a Google document for my students is Autocrat. And so I'm going to go ahead and launch Autocrat. And here are the steps that I have to go through while I'm making these into documents. So this is a new job because I haven't made these into documents before. So in the job name, I'll just call this EK Reflections for Evolution Unit. And then I can move on to the next. All right, and I already have made a template and I need to choose it. So it's not coming up, only Unit 6 and 4 is coming up, but I need Unit 7. So I'm going to connect to Drive, and let's see, I know that it's called Unit 7 EK Reflections, and so let's see if this file comes up when I tell it to search. And here is my template that I've made, and so I'm selecting that one. And now it's getting the tags that I've made, and it's there, so I'm ready to move on. Here's my Unit 7 EK Reflections template. I can move on to the next. And it should, because I've done this so many times, all of my tags should match up just right, so I don't really need to worry so much about checking this. The first time I did it, I had lots of things to check, but now I know it should work pretty well. I'm going to make multiple documents. I don't want to combine all of these together, and I need to decide what I'm going to call each document that's made. So my file name is going to be my students' first and last names and then Unit 7 reflections. So each document will be named with my student name, so it'll be easy for me to know whose is whose. The folder that it's going to put it into is my reflections and FRQ practice in my evolution unit, which is perfect. That's exactly where I want it to be. And then I skip the optional. And here I don't share the docs and send the emails, although if I had more than 10 students, I probably would share these documents by email. What I do right now is actually print them out and hand them out to my students. As I get more students, I will probably rethink that and have my Google form collect their email so that I can just email these documents without needing to print them out. Okay, and I don't need any job triggers. Oops, so now I can save. And this is just saving the job, but then to actually get it to run and make the documents, I need to come up and press run the job. So now as this goes, it's going to merge all of the information from my Google form that's in this sheet and make individual documents for each of my students. Now what I want you to see here is at least the top part of one of my students' reflections. So as you can see, only the essential knowledge statements that they selected and wrote about will show up. So other ones don't show up, but I do give them all of them in a separate document. So this year has been an experimental year for me, at least in figuring out how I want to use these reflections in class. Now that I'm nearly through this year, I think what I'll do next year is actually give them a requirement for how many reflections they need to do each unit, and maybe even assign a little bit of a grade to it, maybe just for completion. to make sure that they're really getting done, and even if they're absent, to take time to look at these and reflect on them. And I want to make sure too that I get these reflection statements back to them and maybe even give them some feedback to make sure that they are where they need to be in their understanding before their unit test.